Okay. I do believe we might be live. Okay. Let's see here. All right, fantastic. This is going to be a super casual stream today. Welcome to another Sunday morning live stream. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be hanging out with the AKAI MPC Live. I've created sort of a groove, a sketch, using a desk full of hardware. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be recording individually all of the elements that make up this sketch that I've created. And we're going to be recording all of the individual pieces and elements into the AKAI MPC Live so that we can change this from sort of a live jam sketch idea into an actual mixed, produced, and arranged track. Thanks for joining me. If you're catching this on the replay, thanks for joining me. Be sure and hit that like button so that YouTube shares the stream to as many people as possible. And I believe we'll go ahead and get started today. Hey, Jeremy. Hey, Wall. All right. Hey, Ed. Can you guys hear me okay? We're going to go ahead and check out this groove that I've got on the desk right now and see how the levels are coming through. Hey, what's happening, Nils? Can you guys hear my voice okay? And can you guys hear the audio okay? Loud and clear. Fantastic. Thank you all. Hey, Ionio. Thanks for tuning in. This is just a sketch that I put together using, let's see here. Let's talk about that, shall we? This little sketch here, a little techno sketch, is being created using a little bit of sound from the Electron Digitone. We're using the Roland TR-8S drum machine for the drum sounds. I'm getting a couple of sounds out of the Roland MC707, and I'm getting a sound out of this Novation KS rack over here. I'm using the Novation SL MK3 MIDI controller and sequencer to do the sequencing here. And let me show you all the different elements that we've got in this little sketch. So we've got a basic kind of a drums groove happening here, coming out of the Roland TR-8S. It's kind of like a really traditional techno kind of drum groove, kind of old school. You guys know I love that 90s techno. We've got like a ride, you know, that 808 kick. I really like this sort of interplay between the kick drum and a low tom sound to kind of get a rhythm built up here. You can add an open hi-hat. Right? We can get a little bit more groove to this by adding in a closed hi-hat. Right? Just a really standard techno kind of groove, right? You can add a ride cymbal in here. You guys know I love that 909 ride. And then lastly, we've got some claps and a snare drum to flesh out the groove. So it's a pretty, you know, full, robust drum groove. Now, out of the Digitone, I'm not actually getting any melodic content, but rather we're getting this awesome FM techno percussion sound. Check this out. Maybe bring that up over here. There it is. And if you listen really close, you'll hear that the percussion sound is actually doing a bit of movement on the timbre of that sound. It's not always the same. So that big percussion with all that effects and reverb and delay, that's coming out of the Digitone. It's the FM synthesis percussion sound. Okay, so we've got some drums here. We can add sort of a bass type of sound. This is coming from the Roland MC707. can do, let me grab my seat here. So I've got this bass sound kind of set up so we can do a little bit of modulation on it and get it a little bit more aggressive. Check this out. How that sound is a little bit more bold and robust and aggressive and interesting now. We sort of tame that sound back down. So this sound has a little bit of movement on it that we can utilize, right? Next up, I'm going to bring in the sound from the Novation KS rack, which is kind of like a 303 type of a sound. Kind of like an acid sound. Just to sort of help flesh out the melodic content of the groove and fill out the frequency spectrum a little better. Now we have one more sound that I've created for this little sketch, and that's coming out of the MC707 as well. I'm going to go ahead and fade that in here. Hey, what's happening, Douglas? Thanks for tuning in. So those are the elements that we are working with today. And yes, Douglas, we're using the MC707 today as a sound source, not as a sequencer. The reason that I got the MC707 in the first place was actually to use it as an 8 synthesizer or drum machine expansion for my workflow when using the Electron Digitact, because it has 8 MIDI tracks in addition to its 8 sampling tracks, and I thought that that would be a really wonderful combination to use those two together and basically be able to use the 707 as like an expansion sound bank of 8 drum machines or 8 synthesizers to add to my sessions when working with the Digitact. But there's never enough hours in the day, and I just haven't been able to really get as much time in with the 707 as I would like to. But the sounds, the quality of these Roland sounds in here are absolutely fantastic. So the goal today is to record all of these individual elements into the AKAI MPC Live. And now, why would we care? Why would we do something like that? I think that I often kind of neglect to really hone in and focus in on the reasons why I might do some things. I don't want to claim that this is like the workflow or the workflow for you. This is just a possible workflow. You guys know that I don't claim any one workflow over the other. I consider myself a hybrid producer, and I really just like geeking out with the gear at the end of the day and exploring this type of stuff as deeply as I can. I spend a lot of hours in here. So I want you to conceptually think about what we're doing here today. I'm going to explain a lot of reasons as we go through this process as to why you might want to do something like this, even though you have, a table full of gear. We're going to take basically a little bit of a sketch. There's no arrangement here. There's no actual mixing or producing. It's just some sounds from some boxes, being run through a mixer. As soon as I, want to do anything else in here and start moving things around, I'll lose this project entirely. Again, if you have a workflow where you have your stuff set up and that stuff stays in one place, this might not be as advantageous for you. But because I change everything up for every single project, we're going to go ahead and get all of these sounds into one box. I've actually made a whole bunch of notes today of reasons why doing something like this might be important and to your workflow, or why it might be beneficial to you, so you can understand where I'm coming from with a lot of this old school techniques here. And so we're going to go through these notes kind of as we're doing this today, and I'm going to continue to explain the reasons why you might actually care about doing something like this for yourself. The first thing specifically is that we're taking all of these sounds that are in, spread out all over my desk, and we're getting everything into one central location for producing, mixing, and arranging. Okay. The benefit to something like this right off the jump is that we're taking this from like a sketch, from like a live jam, into an actual finished track. Okay. When you start recording the pieces of your gear into a box like this, now keep in mind, this box could be any box of your choice. I just happen to really like the AKAI boxes for the built-in effects and all of the production and mixing tools that we're going to get into inside of here. But this could be like a DAW like Ableton, or a DAW of your choice, a DAW on the iPad even. We're just basically taking all of these elements and we're going to reconstruct them inside of one central location. This gives us the ability to say, once I get the sounds out of these boxes, I can reuse all the boxes and, put new sounds in those, and then we can add those. I know a lot of these have multi-timbrality. Is that a word? But if you're using gear that doesn't, like if you have a synthesizer that just makes one sound only and is not multi-timbral, so you can play, 3 or 4 patches at once, this comes in really, really handy so that you can get more sounds out of your synthesizers once you've got like a basic groove built. Another thing is that I find that, once I've got something set up for a project, until I finish that project, I'm not really working on, other stuff, because I move everything around for every project. So if I record all of these pieces into one box, I can then move everything around as needed and not lose the idea or sketch that I've created. Okay, let's get back to the chat in a little bit there, but what I want to do is start the actual work here. And let's start recording these elements into the AKAI MPC Live. Now, if you guys have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask those. This is going to be a really, really casual session. We're just hanging out as friends, like you would hang out with your producer buddies, maybe getting ready for, putting something together, or collabing. Let's see here. I'm going to just check the chat. Hey, Jamie, what's happening? Yes, I am just using the analog outputs of the MC707. I do not use any audio over USB in any form. I know a lot of people do. I know a lot of people have issues with that. That's just not really my workflow. Another thing I want to address, actually, before we start the recording here, is that we're not going to be worrying about like multi-track recording, okay, which is kind of a goal for a lot of live jammers. I'm not just going to hit record in the box and we're going to jam out and it's going to record everything in the box. That's not at all how this works, and that's another reason why I want to go over stuff like this, because there's a definite different set of skills between creating something with a desk full of gear and then actually recording it and getting it into a box where you can, produce, mix, and arrange those sounds. So yeah, we're just running audio today. And the first thing I need to do is to take the main audio outputs from the mixer here, my DJ mixer. This is plugged into my main mixer behind us over here. And I'm going to need to grab those cables and run those into the AKAI MPC Live here. So bear with me while I do that. Okay. All right. Let's see here. I hope that didn't do a big click when I pulled these. I pulled the volume down so that it wouldn't. Let's get this plugged in to the MPC Live. So what we've got here is I'm taking the master out, okay, the master out of this DJ mixer, which everything is running through, and I'm running that into the input of the AKAI MPC Live. I'm going to go ahead and switch the camera now. Let's see if we can get that going. All right, so here's the AKAI MPC Live. Let's get this a tiny bit more centered. Cool. Can you guys see that okay? I did the best I could so that we could hopefully read most of the screen here. Okay. Which PC would I recommend? You know, the PC, I actually did PC for quite some time. And then this last year, I got my first Mac, and I'm really enjoying using the Mac. But for PC, in my experience, the most important thing is RAM. Absolutely, these days, the very minimum of RAM you can get away with for music production on a PC, I would say would be 16 gigs of RAM, and that's really lightweight. If you want something that's really gonna, push those plugins like Arturia and Serum and stuff like that, or maybe Avenger and Spire, you're definitely gonna want to push that RAM as much as you can possibly afford. Yeah, 32 gigs, for sure. Yes, 64 gigs of RAM, absolutely. If you want a production powerhouse and you can get up to 64 gigs of RAM, that's the way to go for sure. But definitely bare minimum 16. Anything less than that, and you're just not really going to be able to do what you need to do with the modern plugins. Okay, so let's see here. The first thing we're going to do is double check the tempo on our sequence, and it's 140 beats per minute. So I'm going to go into the AKAI MPC Live, and right here I'm going to turn the tempo up to 140 beats per minute so that we're matching, okay? We're going to go ahead and start sampling some sounds here. So what we're going to do is I've got all the volumes on the drum machine turned down, and I've got all the other tracks that are coming through the mixer turned down. So the only volume that's coming up is just the drum machine. And if I press play here, we're not going to hear anything yet. And what we need to do is just get ready to sample this. I actually don't have any knowledge really over Intel or AMD processors. No, sorry about that. It's just not really my area of expertise there. Let's see here. So to hear this, we're going to go ahead and go into the menu, and we're going to go into the sampler tab, which is going to allow us to see the input level that's coming in here. This is just our kick drum, and I want to get this, nice and loud. So we're going to adjust the input level on the, let me go ahead and switch cameras again. We're going to change the input level on the back of the MPC Live here so that I can see that I'm getting a pretty strong signal. And now we just want to hear the audio that's coming through here. So I'm going to go ahead and press this button here, and it's going to get loud in 3, 2, 1. Okay, fantastic. Now this is going to get a little strange as I start rerouting all of these levels and whatnot through a different channel on my mixer. But if that gets too loud, just let me know. I think we're going to go with that to start with. Let me just adjust one little tiny thing, I think. Oops. All right, can you guys hear that? It's going to get, we'll adjust the volume as we go here, but the first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and sample this kick drum. I'm going to get a nice hot level here. Yeah, it's okay, fantastic. let's see here, arm, and we're recording. Just need to get a couple of those kicks there, and it's going to put us into the window for a new sample. We're going to go ahead and name this sample, and we're just going to call this kick. Let's call it kick 1. I don't think I'm going to get another kick, but on the off chance that we import more things in, we'll just call that 1, and we'll go ahead and keep that for now. Second thing I want to do is I want to sample in that low tom that sort of goes with the kick drum. Right now, I'm working with a really old Dell computer for the PC, and I'm not super fine with it. So when I'm producing music, I'm using this iMac here that I picked up last year as the main music production computer these days. I'm going to go ahead and sample this low tom sound in. Just record that. Fantastic. And we'll go ahead and press stop there, and we'll label this sound low tom. Okay, fantastic. Low tom, do it, and keep. And now we'll go ahead and start actually putting these sounds on the pads and start creating some sort of, recreating our drum groove, as it were. If I put both of these volumes up and I play our groove, we can hear dun 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 dun. We can hear that rhythm, and that's what I want to recreate inside of the MPC Live first. So to do that, we're going to go into the menu, and we're going to go into the sample edit tab so that I can visually see these samples that I've just recorded, and then I can get in here and actually edit them out. I'm going to go ahead and pick that second kick drum. That looks great. And I'm going to start moving these little tabs around. I'm going to do process and discard so I can start trimming this out. Now I'm going to try to go slow. And if you guys have questions, feel free to ask along the way. But really what this is about today is it's really about the concept of how to, take a desk full of sounds and get them into one box, for recreating. And actually doing some producing, mixing, and arranging. Taking it from that live jam or just a sketch as we have today, and then getting all of the individual elements into a box that we can then work with and program and arrange. So let's go ahead and process and discard. So we're just trimming that out there. Fantastic. And what I've got now, I like to kind of go into the end and process, and then maybe do just like a little fade out at the end, so we're nice and clean there. Fantastic. And then what we're going to do is go to menu and sample edit. Right, just need to pick the other sample now. We're going to go ahead and get that low tom sample. I just want to trim that out there. So I'm going to go process. Now the cool thing about the AKAI MPC Live, for those of you who haven't used one or who haven't explored this type of workflow, let me get into this a little bit deeper. These boxes are really, really robust, and they have a lot of tools in them. A lot of people consider the AKAI boxes to be a DAW in a box, and I completely agree. This has all of the tools that we will need to record, mix, and produce a finished track outside of a computer environment, just inside of a hardware unit. And let's go ahead and trim that out, and let's zoom in a little bit there. And we'll get real close up on the start point of this sample for the tom that we just, sorry about that. Process and discard. Cool, zoom out a little bit. And maybe we can trim some more of that off. Process and discard. Now if I highlight, I know I'm going a little fast, but we have a lot to cover today, and you guys will see how these are same steps go for each of the sounds we're going to record. So we'll be doing this stuff a lot today. It's going to be a lot of editing and just basically hanging out as you see how we recreate this groove. Cool, fantastic. So now if I go back to the main screen, down here at the bottom, I can actually start assigning the samples to the pads. Now there's 16 pads here, but I want you to realize that we actually have 128 pads here. We've got 16, and then we've got 8 banks of 16 sounds in one track. So I can load up to 128 sounds in this one program, in this one bank, on this one track. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be using this as a one bank workflow. This is the same way that I use that I produce in BeatMaker 3. And we're going to just literally keep sampling things and keep laying them out on the pads so that when we go to sequence all this out, we will only have one sequencer window. We're not going to have multiple tracks where there's a bass sequence and a drum sequence and then a separate track for the synth sequence. It's all going to be together in a one track workflow. So hang out. You guys are definitely going to enjoy this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into the Assign Samples window, and I'm going to go ahead and select our first pad, and I'm going to double-click that kick sample and assign it to that pad. Then I'm going to get our low tom on the very next pad, so I'll double-click that to get that. Okay, fantastic. We'll go back to the main, and I just want to hear the pattern, original pattern, so that I can recreate that. It's a really standard kind of pattern. So if I go from the main window and I press this little kind of number looking grid sign here, we're going to get into the main sequencer window of the MPC Live. Now I'm going quickly today because we have a lot to cover, and it's not necessarily about teaching you the ins and outs of the MPC Live as it is showing you the concepts of how and why we do stuff like this. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out just a little bit. We're going to make this a 4-bar loop to begin with, I think. So I'm going to highlight those kick drums and go copy. And by default, it's on nudge, which will allow me to just scoot those over. So if I press play now, you can hear that we've got, you know, just a really standard 4 on the floor pattern, right? For 4 bars. And what I can do is I can just hit the overdub button now. Cool. So in our main pattern, I'm now playing the, let me change cameras here. Whoops. In our main pattern, this is coming, you know, from all the gear on the table. I've got just these 2 tracks turned up, the kick and the bass, the low tom rather, coming from the Roland TR-8S. And now we've recreated that inside of the MPC Live. Now, the first thing that I want to get started on the MPC Live is I want to make sure we get some sort of a limiter on the master bus, and that's going to help protect our ears, our headphones, and our speakers. Let's go ahead and do that before we go any further, shall we? We're going to go to the menu. We're going to go to the Channel Mixer tab, and then here we're going to select we got programs, we got returns, we got masters. Here we go. I always want the outputs 1 and 2 are master output, right? And this is, here we go. This is one of the main things that I think really makes the AKAI series tools really powerful, you guys, is if I want to put an effect on the master bus, right, on the output, on the master channel, all I have to do is click here, and I can put up to 4 different effects on that master bus. Now this is really, really powerful because every single pad in here is an individual sampler, and we can assign 4 different effects to every single pad. This is what I mean by being able to do producing and mixing outside of Ableton. We're literally producing and mixing here. I'm not really seeing any activity in the chat, so either I've bored everyone to tears or the stream is frozen. If we're still going, can you guys please just let me know that we're still active? Thank you. So on the master bus, I'm going to go ahead and double click that here. I'm going to click on EQ, and I'm going to go ahead and add an EQ on the master bus so that the entire track has a master EQ. We're going to go ahead and open that, and we're going to go over to the high and low cut settings. And this is really important in my workflow. We're going to go ahead and turn these frequency adjusters on so that we've got a high cut frequency, anything over 20,000 kilohertz. We're sort of rounding off the top of that, and anything under about 25 kilohertz, whatever, 25 hertz, we're removing those super low frequencies. And basically what this does is these are frequencies that are so loud, so high rather, and then so low rather, that the human ear can't hear them and speaker systems can't recreate them. So we go ahead and we remove those so they don't need to be there at this time. we're going to go ahead and put a second, actually we'll put this on the 4th slot as the very last effect in the chain now. And what we want to do is we want to go to Dynamics, and we want to go to Maximizer, and we'll select that. Now if I bring this open, this is the magic tool. This allows us to change all of our frequency content in the mix that is under a certain frequency amount. It allows us to turn that into a mono signal. And so what I do is I'm taking the low frequency content here. This is the master bus. This is a maximizer running on our master bus. And I'm taking all the content below 120 hertz. So like the very low kick drum subs and the very low bass subs are all going to be in mono now. And this is going to help the mix represent on different speaker systems a lot better. I realize now that if I explain every single step along the way, we're going to be here for a very long time. So I am going to go kind of a little bit quickly here so that we can move forward. We're going to go ahead and set the release time on this compressor. I have some numbers written down of the tempo we're working with. For instance, a 16th note in this tempo is 108 milliseconds. So I think we're going to take the release time of our master compressor here and try to get that as close to 108 seconds as we can. There we go, 108 milliseconds, excuse me. And that's just the release on this master compressor here. Let's go ahead and press play and see what we've got. Fantastic. I'm going to turn this down just a touch. Now what we want is we want the maximizer not to be super squeezing and crushing our mix. We basically we don't want to like just slam our levels into this maximizer and get like a brick wall mix. We just kind of want it at the end of the chain, just as a preventative measure. And what we're going to do is since we're working with just one program today, just one track, one bank, I'm going to load all of the samples onto just one bank. We're going to go ahead and take the master volume on that bank down to maybe like -3 decibels to start with, so that we're not, pushing things into the red or anything like that. Let's go ahead and adjust the low end of that kick drum before we go any further as well. I'm in the pads menu here where I can put the effect on any individual sounds I want. So if I just, select a sound, like the kick drum for instance, I can then put an EQ on that, just on the kick drum alone. So if we edit this, let's see here, you can hear that now we're just affecting the kick drum only, right? And I'm turning on the high and the low cut there, and I'm going to bring the low frequency down on our kick drum the tiniest little bit. It's a pretty loud 808 kick, right? Alright. Hey, what's happening, guys? Hey, what's happening, Connor? Does the live have swing? The live absolutely has swing, and that's a fantastic question. All we have to do to get in and get some swing going is going into the time correct section of like our main window, and here we can set the global swing amount from 50 to whatever we want. We can put that on 16th notes and whatnot, and we can have this affect all of the events in the entire session if we want to. We can have it affect all the events, or maybe just some events that we've selected if we want to maybe just put it on a hi-hat and not the whole mix, for instance. So yeah, definitely swing. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and save at this time. You guys know I'm a chronic oversaver. So now that we've got some elements started, we should probably go ahead and save. So I'll hit save, and it's going to give us the opportunity to decide where we want to put this. And I have my own hard drive in here. Let's go ahead and go into my folder of sessions, and we're going to call this Tech No Live stream for today. Fantastic. Do it and save. Cool. Now I'm a chronic oversaver, so throughout this session I'll just be clicking that save button quite often, so that if anything goes wrong, we don't lose anything, or if I make maybe a grave mistake or something, we have something we could always go back to and reload. Let's see here. So okay, we've got our start here. I think I am pushing too much level. I'm going to adjust my gain on my mixer for just 1 second here. Let's see here. I'm going to go over here to my mixer and just bring this gain down a little tiny bit. Alright, can you guys hear that okay at home? I don't want to blow out everyone's speakers right off the jump, but I want to be loud enough. And let me just adjust the level that's going into. Okay, how are we doing so far? I'll need to keep adjusting this as we get louder today. But so there's our very first two sounds, right? Let's go ahead and get the open hi-hat in here, shall we? If I go back into the sampler page, there's some effects that are coming off of that sound from the TR-8S. I think we'll just go ahead and record it with those on there for now. Just going to arm this and just record a couple of hits of that hi-hat. Cool. Press stop on this sequencer here, and we'll just label this. We're going to call this, it's kind of a half hat. I'm using it as an open hat, but it's kind of more of a half hat, and I have a more closed hat as well. So we'll call that one half hat for now, and we'll go ahead and assign that, anywhere we want to assign that sound. I think I'll go ahead and assign it to this pad here. So we'll go edit samples, assign samples, and I'll double click that one. Fantastic. So now we just need to edit out that individual sound that we recorded, right? So if I go into the sample edit tab and we start scrolling and we find what we just recorded here, I just need to get one of these hits. So we'll go ahead and pick, arbitrarily one of those, and I'll process and I'll discard everything else. We'll start zooming in on the beginning of the sample. Right in there. Can you guys, am I on the right? No, let me change the camera so you guys can see what we're doing here. Getting right in on the beginning of that sample and process and discard. And what I'm doing when I do that discard is we're just, like if I move these points here and I do a discard, we're just getting rid of everything that's on the outside of the start and end point of the sample. We're literally doing all the sample editing right here. Okay, what I think we're going to do is see if we can leave that sort of effects tail in, but just fade out the end of this real quick. So I'll scroll over to fade out. I'm going to highlight what I wanted, and then just hit fade out. Now we're going to get rid of that extra. So it's just one. This was the delay tail from the built-in delay on the drum machine that's coming through there. And we can add our own delay in the MPC Live. I could have recorded this in, clean, taking the time to turn off the delay, but I didn't really think that was necessary, as we can just, fix that real quick right here. Whoops, I did that wrong, though. So we're going to undo and bring that back over here. And no, what I wanted to do, actually, I'm doing this all wrong. We're going to bring the end point, rather. There we go. Cool. And I'll process, and we'll get rid of that little bit at the end that had that delay tail on it. And now we can just process and fade out. So we've got our hi-hat sample, and go back to the main menu. And there we have it. So if I played the groove, let's go ahead and put that in, shall we? Cool. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of producing and mixing on this sample right off the jump, shall we? If we go to menu and we go to program edit, then we can individually edit any of these sounds that are in our program. And so I'm just going to select that hi-hat sound, and I'm going to go over to the filter page. Another really powerful feature inside of these AKAI boxes is, let's remember, each pad I can assign 4 individual effects to, and each pad has its own built-in filter as well. So this could be a low-pass filter, any number of, different kinds of low-pass filters, more extreme, less extreme, or we can turn it into a high-pass filter, which for a hi-hat is absolutely what I want to do. I want to remove any possible, low-frequency content that could be maybe hiding out down there in this sound. This is something that you're really not going to hear so much, and that's what you want. We just want to, cover our bases per se. Cool, that sounds pretty good already. Maybe bring the volume on that hi-hat sound down just a little bit. We can go to level. Cool. And let's go ahead and get the next hi-hat sound in, which sounds like this here. Cool. If I go to this pattern, actually, I can, whoops, come on. What am I doing wrong here? Cool, I'm actually just going to tap that in manually this time so we don't get any of those extra notes. I'm going to go to sampler and we're just going to hit arm and record so that it's rolling. I'm going to go ahead and tap that on the drum machine just one time so that we get that recorded. And this is our closed hat. And we'll keep that sample. I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but it's a little bit difficult. Hey, Luke, thanks for tuning in. Hey, Russ. All right. Ooh, pulled pork tonight. Come on, Russ, bring it over here. We need some of that. All right. Okay, so we've got ourselves another sample to edit. We're going to go into the menu. We're going to go to Program, Edit. Whoops, sorry, Sample, Edit. And there's that closed hi-hat that I just recorded. We're going to go in there and process, discard, so we can start seeing it a little better. It's a little bit low in volume, so if I process, I can choose all of these different things to do with the sample, right? We can trim it and cut it, then discard the edges. We can, delete little sections of the sample if we want to. We can add silence in different sections, like if it's a loop and we want to maybe take out a note, we can mute or silence something. We can extract little portions of the sample to make that a brand new sample. We can normalize this to bring the volume up to, full volume to the 0, amount. We can reverse the sample, make it play backwards. We can select what we want and do a little fade in for editing. We can select what we want and do a little fade out for editing. We can change the pitch of the sample, right? Like bake that right in. And we can time stretch the sample, make it shorter or longer. And then here we have gain change, which is what I want. I just want to bring the volume up on that sound a little bit. Let's do that again, shall we? Fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit, and we'll edit the start point of this sample. Whoops, I'm on the kick, and I need to scroll over to the closed hat. There we go. And if we just keep zooming in, we can get, we can get right in at the beginning of that sound. Fantastic. Process and discard. So now we just got the beginning all tight there. Let's see how long this is. Quite a bit longer than we need. Cool. Process, discard. Now we've got it shorter. And last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and just fade out that little tiny bit at the end. That's just sort of a personal extra level of, stuff that I do to make sure there's no weirdness or clickies at the end of the sample. Okay. And if we go back to the main page here, I can press assign samples, and then we can put, select what pad we want by either pressing the screen or pressing one of these pads here. And then we select the sample we want to put there and double click it. Fantastic. So now, cool. All we need to do is, these are basically the same sound now in theory. Stick with me here, conceptually, right? It's like a hi-hat. This is like the closed hi-hat, and this is like the open hi-hat. But they're basically like the same instrument, for instance. We wouldn't want, like, conceptually these to play at the same time, because you couldn't really play a closed hi-hat and an open hi-hat at the same time. So we want to make sure that whenever we hit one of these pads, it mutes the other one so that they work together and they don't work over each other. How we're going to set that up is just by going to the menu, going to Program, Edit. And again, this is really easy because we're just working in one program today. We're not working in like a whole program for drums, and then a second program for basses, and then a third program for all the melodic content, and then a fourth program for all the effects content, all that kind of stuff, which you can absolutely do. You can make as many tracks as you need to make and split your instruments up that way. But I really don't find the need to work with this box that way because we have have such individual control over the elements in our bank. I just find that producing in one bank gets me where I need to go. And in fact, I actually produced a track this way that made it on to not my very last EP, because that was Digitact only, but the EP that I put out before that, so maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. That EP is called These Thoughts Don't Belong to You. And there is a track on that EP called Good Times, It's All Right. And I wrote that track exactly how we are doing today. All the pieces got recorded into the MPC Live in just one bank, and I mixed and produced and finalized and mastered that track all inside of the MPC Live. I write music under the moniker Prism Prime, so if you're curious about, how music might sound if you follow this type of a workflow and use these type of tools, check out my track, Prism Prime, Good Times, It's All Right. That was produced this exact same way. Let's go ahead and also do a high pass filter on our new hi-hat sound, shall we? And again, this is what I mean by producing and mixing. Each pad has individual settings, okay? And so here's our kind of half hat, and we set that to a high pass filter. And we're going to do the same thing here with the same settings on the closed hat sound. Put that down to 25. Okay, and now if I go to the master page, I can tell, I can tell the brain here that every time I hit this pad, it should mute any, 4 other pads or whatever. So I only needed to mute one other pad, and that's pad number 8. This is pad number 7. So I'm telling it that when pad number 7 plays, if pad 8 is playing, turn that off. And I'm going to tell it that when I hit this pad, that if pad number 7 is playing, turn that off. We've done that. And now the sounds don't play over each other ever. You hear how this sound is, a certain length, but I can really choke it off. We definitely want that. And what we're going to do also for a little bit of, just a little, all these tiny little adjustments, they add up to a really balanced mix in the end. We're going to go ahead and take our sort of half hat sound, maybe pan that 3 to the right, and our closed, and maybe pan that 3 to the left. Again, this is so subtle that you really won't hear it, but it adds up the tiniest little amount. We're going to go ahead and save what we've done so far, and we're going to go ahead and reduce the volume now on our new hi-hat sound. We're going to hit the pad mixer page, and I'm just going to bring the level on that down a little bit. So if I play our full groove, let's see here, we've got a kick, we've got a tom. Let me change the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Over here on the drum machine, I basically want to recreate what we've got here, right? So you can kind of hear what the hi-hat pattern is doing. Let's see if we can't get that happening over here on this side as well then. We're going to go into the main window so that I can see our pattern. And I can just start zooming in. This is great, and this is another reason why I like the one bank workflow, is I can see every single thing, every element that we're working with in the entire track, all in one sequencer window. Hello, I have the MPC X. Should I? Yeah, absolutely. You will be able to do every single thing that I'm doing here with the MPC X. The difference with the X is that you've got a lot more shortcut knobs and more like kind of knob per function, and it's laid out like maybe more user-friendly. But the engine inside of it is pretty much identical, and you will absolutely be able to do everything that I'm doing here with an MPC Live. And you could also do all of these things with an AKAI Force as well. And also the new MPC2 and the new MPC1, all of those you can do this same type of workflow with. So what we're going to do is we're going to now just zoom way in, right? If I tap a pad, it's going to sort of highlight on the screen which row that is. And so here's our new hi-hat sample. And basically, I just want to put this in on every note that the sort of half hat is not playing on, right? And I did that wrong, so let's go undo again. There we go. I also, whoops, I did it wrong again. I also really like the undo feature in this box. It's pretty robust and it remembers quite a lot of steps that you can go back if you've made mistakes. Some of the boxes I have right now don't have any undo, and that's always a little bit frustrating. So I really like it, when companies take the time to, put that in. And I really think everything should have it, for Pete's sake, right? Actually, what we'll do, I'm putting in a pretty static pattern here, so let's change that. I'm going to delete what I've just put in a little there. And what we're going to do is zoom back in. And what I think we'll do is some velocity variations on these sounds right off the jump. So if I click the velocity button, now when I roll the wheel, I'm just changing the velocity of whatever note I have highlighted. It also kind of changes the color on that step so you can see a little bit. And by default, it puts everything at maximum velocity, 127. But maybe I'll bring this one here down to like 90. And maybe I'll bring this second one here down to like, I don't know, 115. And maybe that third one down to 100. So we've got a little bit of velocity variation. And we're not just banging some, boring hats that are the same all the time. Cool. Now I can just copy these out. I've highlighted it. Whoops. Nope. Didn't quite work right. So there we go. Undo, undo. Zoom out a little bit. Cool. Okay, what it didn't do is it didn't actually get those where I need them to be, which is right there. Cool. So we'll go ahead and highlight that again, click copy, and just nudge that where it goes. Click copy, nudge it, click copy, nudge it. Cool. All right. One more time, maybe another time, and I think that we got it. Yeah. And we can go ahead and go back into the pad mixer here. We can maybe bring our close hi-hats quite a bit down in the mix so we get, a play in the rhythm here and not just a, yeah, that's better. Bring those way down actually to give for that room in the mix for the half hat to sit, right? Okay, so I'm recreating the groove that we started with in the drum machine, which sounds like this, right? And here we have it, right? The same beat. Okay, let's go ahead and save what we've done so far. We've got a long way to go. This is going to be a long stream today, I think. So bear with me, or, feel free to tune out if this kind of thing isn't your bag. Let's see here. How long does the AKAI? I don't know exactly the maximum sample time. But something about these boxes is that, people do run out of sample time. For instance, if you're trying to load what people call stems, which would be like maybe the bass, drums, synth, and effects of like a 5-minute track, that's like, 5 or 6 different stems. And those kind of things will fill up the memory in like a second. These boxes are really meant to work with like one-shots and loops and stuff. And that's another reason why we're sampling into it this way, rather than just trying to like record big, long sections. But you can absolutely get tons and tons and tons of one-shots and loops in here. It's when you start trying to load like full track length stems that you're going to run into a really big problem. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and get these clap sounds recorded. So if I bring all the levels down in the drum machine except for the claps, and we press play, we can go ahead and sample those in. Go to the sampler and just record that in. Cool, right? But I mean, we're talking like 20 some odd minutes. I mean, you got a lot of sampling time. But imagine, 5 tracks that are 5 minutes each. That's 25 minutes of sampling time right there, But imagine how many samples you could get in to say 20 minutes of sampling time if they were just one shots and, 4-bar loops and whatnot. Tons and tons of samples, right? So yeah, it hasn't really been an issue for me personally. The sample time, but I know it has been for some people. The samples do not stream from disk in these AKAI boxes. So once you max out the internal memory, that's it. We're going to go ahead and call that clap, and we're going to keep that. Now we just need to edit that out, real clean here. So we'll go to sample edit, and here's that clap we just recorded. I'm going to go ahead and just arbitrarily pick one of these to start editing out. We'll go to process and discard. So we just got one clap here. We're going to go ahead and zoom in a bit so that I can see right at the beginning of that sample. I'm going to choose the start point here, and we'll just start scrolling over, maybe zoom in a little more. See how we're getting right up on the start point of that sample? I'm going to process and discard the areas around that there. I know I'm going pretty quick today, so sorry, but there's a lot to get through. Just going to go ahead and pick the very end of that and do a process and a fade out. Cool. And then we just need to assign that clap to one of these pads. Let's go ahead and assign it to this pad here, shall we? Clap. All right. Let's go ahead and put that in. Now, I'm going to play the other groove, the original groove, so we can make sure that we're, sounding pretty much the same, level-wise, mix-wise. So this is our main mix. It's actually coming out of the drum machine, and then here's the MPC Live. Sounds pretty much the same. That's what we want. Let's go ahead and get this snare drum now. So I'll turn down all of the tracks except for the snare drum. We're going to go ahead and sample that. I'm just going to go into the sampler. I'll just arm it and get it ready. Just press play. Fantastic. Now we've got that snare. Just kind of like a really basic 808 snare. I'm going to call this 808 snare and keep that. Now we just need to edit that sample. So if we go menu, I'm going to change the camera here. And then we can see that snare that we've just recorded in. I think I might have clipped the level. Let's double check that here by going back to the sampler page. Yeah, I'm clipping the level. So we're going to turn our input level down a little bit and record that again. Because we absolutely don't want to clip the sample. We want to leave enough headroom so that it's not, going over the 0 decibel. There we go. Fantastic. All right. And 808 snare 1, fine. And we'll go into menu, and we'll go into sample edit, and then snare 1. Fantastic. And that is not clipping. So we're going to grab that, and we're going to edit this out by process and discard. So we have just, whoops, what are you doing there? Process, discard. So what is this weird line doing there? I don't know if I'm vibing that at all. Let's delete this. 808 snare 1, delete. Why is this weird line here? Menu. I've never seen that happen before. I think what we're going to do is whenever I'm glad this happened actually, because whenever I see like anomalies and stuff, the very first thing I do is I save, right? Okay, and then we just turn it off. And this I've never had this particular anomaly with this unit, but there's no reason why we can't just get a reboot real fast and see if that strange line goes away. I don't like to continue like working in something if something seems awry, you know what I mean? Because I get the feeling like we're feeding into a bug at that point or something. So let me show you the startup process of the MPC Live while we're waiting. Just goes through a little bit of a waiting process here. Oh, hey, thank you very much. Learn to Zach, I appreciate that. Hey, Grant, thanks for tuning in. All right. So here we go. All we need to do is just, click the last project here. It's going to load that up. If I go back into the menu, and yeah, we can see that line is gone. So definitely I want to stress that. And this is for iPad or for hardware or for desktop or for anything. If something is acting a little bit strange, time to save, time to reboot the computer or reboot the device. That's always my step one. And like 9 times out of 10, that'll take care of whatever problems you're having. Hey, Alessandro, thanks for tuning in. All right. Okay, here. So we've got, where are we at here? We need to get that that clap edited, that snare edited. What am I saying? Where is it? Did we lose it? Nope, it's here. But that's the first one. And we actually did delete the one that I re-recorded. So we'll get that again. Cool. I find sampling in the AKAI MPC Live really, really easy to do. And I love that we can just, get in here and label stuff like this afterwards. 808, snare. Cool. Do it. And we'll keep that sample. And we're going to go into the menu and sample edit. And now we can just edit that out. So we'll process and discard. Maybe start zooming in on the beginning of that sample so that we can see the start point really well, right? Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. All right, and we'll process and discard and chop out that sample. Going to zoom out and see how long it is. I'm going to go ahead and normalize this sample so that it's as loud as it can be without going over the 0 decibel. Yeah. Yeah. And process and discard. Let's just grab that tiny little bit of the end section that we've got highlighted. I'm going to fade that out. Just to make absolutely, even if there's something that if I can't hear any clicks, I kind of just do that always, you know what I mean? Better safe than sorry, per se. Assign samples. So now we just need to get that, snare sound somewhere. Let's go ahead and we could choose any of these pads we wanted, but we'll choose this one here. And 808 snare, we'll double tap that to get that on the pad. Recording the snare in here. Okay. So we have, let's see here, everything but the ride symbol. So let's go ahead and get that ride symbol, shall we? And let's see here. If we go back to the sampler page, I want a nice level on that ride. So why don't we bring up the gain a little bit here? All right. And let's record that. What I'll do is I'll take that last hit because it has a little bit of a tail on it. We're going to call this 909 ride because it is the 909 ride. You guys know I love that 909 ride. We're going to go keep, and we're going to go back into the menu to sample edit. And here's that ride we just recorded. So I'm going to zoom into that last note there and start processing and discarding. We're going to bring the volume up on this just a little bit more so that I can see it a little better as well. Bring that gain change up a little bit. Cool. Now we can start zooming in to the beginning of the sample. We can see. I also like working with the Force and working with the Live is that I kind of go back and forth between touching on the screen and using the pads and the knobs. I kind of like that you can do both. That you've got the touch screen and all the other controls as well. Discard, fantastic. Let's go ahead and zoom back out. Yeah, that's awesome. We don't need all that at the end. Cool. Let's go ahead and bring that to about maybe actually. We'll go ahead and discard first, so it's just what we need. And we'll select maybe a bunch at the end here and do that fade out that I like to do real quick. Make sure we get that all the way at the beginning. And we'll assign the ride to a pad now by going back to the Assign Samples page. How about we put it over here, right? Let's go 909 ride, double tap that, put it on the pad. Fantastic. Now, do you guys remember how we used the built-in filters and stuff to put a little bit of a high-pass filter on these hi-hats? We're going to do the same thing on this ride symbol because we definitely don't want any like sub-frequencies that we can't hear, maybe just sort of like hanging out in this sample. So we're going to go ahead and assign this sample to a high-pass filter. Let's remember that every single pad now has its own filter settings. So any pad could have any filter settings. You could have a high-pass filter or low-pass filter on any of your pads. And again, the goal here isn't necessarily that we hear a difference in the sound. What we're doing is just making sure that there's no sub-frequency content that could be hanging out in the sound. When you turn down a sample, does that affect the sample quality resolution? I typically keep things loud for the best resolution. You don't necessarily have to. That's just sort of a workflow thing that I've been into for a while. I definitely would prefer the sample itself be louder, and then I'll bring the volume down on the track rather than have the sample be low and then ever have to bring the volume up on a track, for instance. I would want the sample to be louder, not the track volume itself. And the reason is because if I bring the volume up on all these tracks to their, where they need like really high, that's going to create a louder noise floor in the mix than what we actually need. I hope that makes any sense. I'm just going to pan this ride cymbal a tiny bit to the left. Maybe bring that down in the mix some more. Go ahead and punch this in, shall we? Or actually, wait. I'd like to get some velocity variation happening on what the ride cymbal is doing. So if I go into the actual sequencer window here from the main screen, I just press the little kind of number sign, grid looking symbol, and we get into our actual piano roll for the pattern, right? So what I want to do is, again, if you just tap a pad, it'll sort of highlight, which row on the window you're working with. So we can see here that we're working with this row here. I can just sort of zoom in and 1 and 2. Okay, so I want eighth notes. So what I can do is just put in 2 eighth notes, right? And what I want is a dun 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 dun, like a ride, dun 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 dun. But I want the second hit to not be as loud as the first hit, so it's more like a natural kind of drummer sound, and we're not just banging away at the listener's brain the whole time nonstop, So I'm going to have the first ride at full velocity, and I'll bring that second one down to like 105 or something. I'll copy both of these with the highlight tool. I'll hit the copy button, and then I'll just nudge those into place where I want them. I'll do that a couple more times. Check out how that sounds. Yeah, it's exactly what I want. And we're going to go ahead and highlight that whole bar now and copy that over, nudge it where I want, start zooming out a little so I can see. There we go. And copy and nudge it, and copy and nudge it. Whoops, too much. And undo and undo. Cool. So this is the ride. I think what we're going to do... Bring the ride down in volume. Maybe more even. We're going to put that high pass filter up a little more. Yeah. All right. Can you easily store sequences, samples, and trigger them live? I don't actually use the MPC Live really as a live tool, but you can use it as a live tool. You can't, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking specifically. Once you've got the samples in the box, you can use it as its internal sequencer to sequence out your patterns. You can turn things on and off in real time. So if you've programmed some stuff, you can absolutely program it how you need it to be so that you can still interact with the elements live. And if you want to trigger something live, you would just plug in, sample the sounds in, and then just use any sequencer of your choice if you want to use these as like as a sampler to hold samples where you can trigger with a different sequencer, I guess is what I'm saying. So here's our, let's see here, let me change the camera so you guys can see. Okay, so here's our groove coming out of the MPC Live, and then we've got our clap a bit lower in volume on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust that now, I think, and bring the clap up just a little bit in the mix. Oh, I see. Cool. All right, that'll do for now, I think, and we'll go ahead and save. Cool. There's our drums recreated. So what we've done is we've just now, whoops, I changed back when I didn't need to. We've just sampled all of the drums that were coming out of the TR-8S, and we've got all those recreated now inside of the MPC Live. And what sort of this is going to allow us to do, is not only, program our patterns and whatnot, but also, add and take away as we need to. If we want to get really creative, we could copy these sounds to other pads and make different variations of the sound as we're going, as we need to. But what we'll do now, I think, is go ahead and turn up the digitone, and there's a percussion sample that I've got playing out of there, and it's kind of a random sample where it changes the timbre a little bit as it plays. Yeah, cool. Do you hear how it sort of changes? I want to get a few different variations of this. And I think I would like to save that delay and reverb that's baked into, I'm pointing at the TR-8S still, but it's really coming out of the digitone. Excuse me while I grab a sip of coffee. And let me take a moment to catch up with the chat, please. Being able to launch well, see, it's I don't think so. I'm not 100% sure because I don't use it that way, Douglas. I don't think so specifically. Not from a pad. Maybe I'm wrong. Actually, the more I think about that, but I don't want to say 100 on that. So yeah. Okay, right. We're going to grab that percussion sound, and I want to get that effect that is baked into it. And I want to get a few different variations of it as well, because that's kind of one of the benefits of this particular sound in the digitone is that it does that movement. Let's go ahead and hit record on the MPC Live, and I'm going to just play that sound. That's weird. What is that? We got a hung note there coming off the digitone. Let's go ahead and try that again, shall we? Awesome. So here are that. I'm letting that reverb and that delay sort of trail out so that they're baked into the sample. We're going to call this digi. Actually, who cares if it's from a digitone? It's an FM percussion. So we're going to call this FM perk 1. Whoops. Perk. Come on. 1. Cool. And do it. Whoops, I'll change cameras so you guys can see what I'm doing. Fantastic. And we'll keep that sound. But I want to get a couple of variations of it because it does that timbre movement. Let's try that again. See if we can't get it to do a different. That second one, it did it. So I'm letting it trail out all the way. Okay, now we'll press stop on that and FM perk 2. Fantastic. We'll go ahead and keep this. And now we just need to edit both of those samples real fast. So if we go into, let's put that weird line back again. Can you guys see this weird line? That might be a line for something that I just don't know what that is. But I've not seen that before, is the thing. It's kind of a weird thing. Oh, now it seems like it's taking it away. I'm just zooming in here at the beginning of our percussion sample that we just recorded here. Make sure the start is highlighted so I'm actually scrolling the start point and not scrolling the actual sample. And we'll just trim that out, zoom out a little bit. Yeah, I'm just making sure that I get all of the end of that sound there. So we're going to go ahead and process and fade out right at the end there. And that's FM percussion 1. Let's do that same thing for FM percussion 2, shall we? I need the second half. This is what I meant about I can use my fingers to interact with it, or I can, use the knobs and the buttons. And I kind of sort of do both as I'm working Okay, we'll just sort of zoom in here, and I think that with a machine like this, you sort of develop your own way of working with it, per se. Zooming out there. I'm going to go ahead and just leave all that stuff at the end, but we're just going to fade it out. Fade out. Cool. Now that I've made those extra sounds, we're going to go ahead and save. Just takes a second, embed those into the project. So if anything goes wrong, there's no possibility of us, losing any information. Let me go ahead and turn the drums back up again so that I can hear how this percussion sound fits into the drums on the main groove. Let's see here. Why am I not hearing that? Oh, there we go. 1, 2, down. 1, down. Okay, so let's go ahead and assign those new percussion samples to the pads, shall we? We'll go to the Assign Samples page, and maybe we'll just put percussion 1, double tap, and put that on this pad. And percussion 2, put that on that pad. Cool. Let's do that thing where these pads cannot play at the same time as one another. So, for instance, when pad 11 plays, if pad 12 is playing, it should mute pad 12. And if pad 12 is playing, it should mute pad 11. Let's go ahead and also pan this one a little bit to the right and this one a little bit to the left, just for a little bit of stereo separation in the sounds. I'm going to bring those down in the mix quite a bit as well. Okay. Okay, so because I've recorded these two different variations, when it was originally playing back from the digitone, it was a completely random timbre change. I didn't know what was going to come out. But now that we've got two specific recordings, we can literally just go back and forth between these two sounds and create kind of a call and a response in our groove. Let's go ahead and record this in, shall we? I think I just want to adjust the volume a little bit here. All right. Hey, thanks for joining while you can, Russ. Okay, so here's the groove coming out of the gear, right? The full table of gear. Oh, I see. I've got the percussion on the wrong beats here. So I think what we're going to do is just delete what I've recorded and shift and cut those. And let me hear this again. Yeah, it's coming in on the snare. Okay, cool. Yeah. And so now let's hear the original pattern. Right? Dun, dun, bop, dun. But we don't have control in the original pattern over the timbre of that percussion sound, but now we do. All right. Bring these up in the mix just the tiniest bit still. Hey, what's happening? We got SOO 100 brand in the chat. All right, thanks for tuning in. Now that we're getting a little bit louder, can you guys still hear my voice okay over the beat? I hope so. If not, please let me know, and I can make whatever adjustments we need to make. So that's all of the drum sounds now. We've got both machines with all the drums recorded out. So I think the next thing we can do is get kind of our main sort of bass pluck recorded out. Let's see if we can do that. Yeah. Let's record that, shall we? Fantastic. Yeah, it's a great level we're getting. Looks good. Let's do it. Arm and record and play. Actually, I think I have that as a 4-bar loop. Let's get a little bit more of that recorded, shall we? Perfect. Perfect. Oh my gosh. All right. Fantastic. I stopped it right in time there. Let's go ahead and edit that. So we'll swap the camera here, and that is going to be our, let's call that base 1, shall we? I'm going to get some variations of that as we keep progressing forward today, hopefully. Oh my gosh, have we really been streaming for 80 minutes already? Oh boy, I thought I was going to get a lot more done here in this amount of time. Let's see, we'll go ahead and keep that sample. And this is our base now, our main base. And so now we have some options as far as, how we want to start laying out the pads. I was explaining in the beginning of the stream, if you missed it, how I'm using a one bank workflow inside of the MPC Live, where we're literally we can, you see 16 pads at a time here, but in each bank, we really have 128 samples that we can load into it. We've got this is basically bank A, bank B, bank C, bank D, and then if we hold shift, we've got, E, F, G, and H. So we've got 8 banks of 8 pads on one track. This is a really powerful box, you guys. Let's go ahead and edit that, shall we? We're going to go into the sample edit window, and here's that baseline I got the second time. We're going to go ahead and discard that, chop out and discard that first part, and let's just start zooming in to the downbeat of this baseline, shall we? We're going to get right in there on it, zoom right in, make sure our sample start is selected. Cool, I think right there looks good. So discard and then start zooming out on our baseline. Yeah. Hey, Grant. Hey, Colin Powell in the chat. All right. I think we're just going to leave, most of that in there, but I am going to trim a little bit off and then go over here to the very end and kind of just do a fade out. And let's see here. We're going to go back to the main window and then press on our little grid tab so that we can start getting that baseline in. But I realize now that I spoke about the workflow and then we didn't actually address that. So we'll need to do that at this time. And what I mean is how we're going to lay out the samples. For instance, on the first set of 16 pads here, I've been laying out all the drums. But if I click to the next section of 16 samples, so bank B inside of this track, we've got another 16 pads. And I think that's what we're going to do is we're going to start putting the baseline on our second set of pads here. And what I want to do then is just pop that right in. If I touch the pad, it's going to highlight, what track we're working with, which now is B01. I say track, but what I really meant is pad. And we're just going to put the downbeat in on B01, and we're going to change the end of this sound so that it holds out for a full 4 bars. But you may be saying to yourself, Dean, when you hit the pad, it just plays out for a full 4 bars. And that is true. But we don't actually want it to do that. We want it so when we hit the pad and hold the pad down, it decides how long it plays. That it doesn't play all the way through every time I hit the sample, right? So this goes back into what I was talking about earlier, how every pad has its own settings, right? We've got our own filter settings. So for instance, I can put a tiny, tiny high pass filter on this and get rid of like the most sub frequencies you've ever heard, right? So that, again, we're not really affecting the sound here. We're just making sure that there's no super, super low frequencies that the ear can't hear and the speakers can't reproduce. Hey, thank you very much, Philip. I appreciate that. Let's see here. So what we want to do is we just need to go to the LFO modulation page so we can turn this sample from a one shot until it's a note on. And now it's only going to play when I hold the pad down. I just want to affect the release time on that just a tiny little bit there so it doesn't have any clicks when I let go of the pad. And we can adjust that as needed. Now we can just go back to our actual sequencer page here. Whoops. Make sure we're not in the select menu. I love being able to just kind of pinch and zoom as well. You can you can see how many notes we're now looking at in one screen. This is another reason why I like to use this one bank workflow is that you can literally see your entire track right here. There's all the notes right there. If we want to make some adjustments, you just zoom in to where you want to make those adjustments, and then you can make them whatever you need to do. Whether you need to, change the velocity on a sound or move where it's triggering, any of those type of things. What did I do wrong here? Did I move some samples in a weird way? Yeah, I sure did. I accidentally overwrote the kick drum there. Okay, kick, tom, clap, snare, hats, right. Okay. Fantastic. But that's not the pattern. So if I bring, let's see here, the mixer up, and we can hear it on the, again, let me just switch cameras so you guys can see what I'm doing here. So the bass line is actually triggering on the upbeat, not on the downbeat where I put it. So let's go ahead and adjust that so we get the proper start of this bass line, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and just move the beginning point. If I'm not mistaken, it's on the and of one and, but I could be wrong. Nope, it's not. Let's try the snare of one. Let's see here. It's this track here. If I go to patterns, and I go to pattern 1, and I go to steps. 4. I'm just trying to find out where it goes on the beat, per se. I think a little before that. Yep, there it is. So the actual part itself started a little bit off of the beat there, but now we've got it lined up. And what we can do is maybe bring that bass sound down in the mix just a little bit. Try to get it back in the mix a little. It's sounding pretty good, you guys. Can you guys still hear that okay? Alright, let's go ahead and save. We've got the bass line in now. We'll go main and save. Just embed that bass sample in there. Alright, let's see here. I think our bass might be a little bit too loud still. It's difficult for me to do the, finite mixing when I'm on headphones per se. But I do the best that I can, and I'll sort of, adjust these as needed when I'm not on headphones. I'm actually enjoying working on headphones a lot these days because my neighbors were complaining, I guess, when we first moved in to this new place and whatnot. It gets pretty loud. These speakers are not small, if you know what I mean. And lately what I've been doing is kind of doing a lot of work on the headphones and whatnot, and then I'll just turn the speakers on for like a few minutes real loud and just make sure everything sounds the way I want it to sound, do a little bit of adjusting, and then I've been kind of going back to working on the headphones again. Alright, let's see here. So one of the things that we can do with the MPC Live is that we can mute tracks in real time. So if I don't want to have this whole pattern just banging away, we can go to the pad mute section. Oops, I'm in the wrong bank. Good in the mix there. I actually haven't tried any headphone like localization programs, or like there's a Sonar Reference Works. A friend of mine was talking to me about the other day as well. But yeah, for the headphones, I'm just kind of working on headphones regularly, and then I'll just check on the speakers to make sure that the mix I'm happy with, And actually that's gotten me a little bit more used to working on headphones than I used to be. I'm able to kind of get the mix where I want it a lot better on headphones than I used to be. we're sounding pretty good so far. I think I just saved, but let's save again, shall we? And let's go ahead and get the 303 line that's coming out of the Novation KS rack. Let's get that in the mix. I'm going to go back to the sampler page, and let's see here. Yeah, cool. It's going to get a little bit more level on that. Coming in. Fantastic. And we'll go ahead and arm and record. Okay, so the track mutes we just did. All you do is go, let me actually save this real quick. We're going to call this 303 acid 1. Okay, and keep. So if we've got a groove built like we have here, all we have to do is go to the menu, and then we can go to like this pad mute section here. And now all we have to do is when the groove is playing, start muting things in real time as we need to. So if you want to set this up as something that you can live jam out, you're definitely going to want to take a lot of care into how you place the sounds on your pads so that you can mute the pads as needed. There's also like a track mute section, but I haven't explored that super a lot, I guess. But definitely you can get into this track mute section and then just sort of play things back in real time, especially if you've only maybe got 16 different instruments or tracks going here, then this would be a really easy way to be able to, turn things on and off and arrange the sequence in real time. Speaking of which, guys, at the beginning I said that I had made quite a few notes here about the reason, we just stand up and stretch for a bit, the reason why you might want to do something like this, why you might want to take a table full of gear that you've made a sketch in and record the individual elements into one box. We talked a little bit before about some of the advantages, like, now you've got everything in just one box, and I can get in and start producing, mixing, and arranging this into a finished track. If we don't have the individual elements recorded out, all I can really do is put some sort of a stereo recorder at the end of the chain here and just record, a stereo track of any live jam that I make or whatnot. But as we get these elements, the individual elements recreated inside of something like the MPC Live, I'm able to EQ all of those elements individually and start doing all of this arranging in the box. It allows us to now, if we were using, and now that I've recorded, for instance, the sound from this Novation KS rack, I could now load up another sound in that rack, you know what I mean, and get more out of the instruments than just one sound per instrument if I'm not working with multi-timbral things. So for me personally, I find that every single project that I'm doing is a different, setup, is different gear and different things on the table. So if I'm building something or if I'm in the middle of something and I'd maybe, like to work on something else today, I'm kind of shit out of luck, if you know what I mean. I mean, the table's all filled up with the gear that's set up. If you work with the same workflow all the time, then this might not be as advantageous in that respect to you, because you're not necessarily going to be clearing your table off and getting more space, but you don't want to lose this little project or whatever. Something also that's an advantage to recording these little, recording the elements individually in is that now that we've got these pieces in audio, we can do things to the samples that we wouldn't be able to do normally. We can chop things up as we need to, we can re-pitch things as we need to, and we can reverse things as we need to. So getting things into audio allows us different ways to work with those sounds as well that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. And again, what if you're not interested in making, a finished track in a box like this, and your whole point is to make a live jam? Like, why would you care to record all this stuff into the box? Still, for the same reasons that we've been talking about, you can still create it in the box as a live jam. It just depends on how you work with the box and how, learned you are at using the tools in the box. And, admittedly, I don't know 100% of the tools in this box. I only know most of them. Another thing is that as we build the the jam, as we start building the elements up inside of the MPC Live, we can always, if we want, export from the MPC Live into Ableton format. So we're basically working in a DAW, but we're working with our hands instead of working in a computer and staring at the computer screen and using the mouse. I've been doing music production for over 20 years, and let's be real. I mean, my mouse finger is very, very tired. And if I sit down, whoops, and I just only work on the computer and I'm only using the mouse, that really, my 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 fingers, definitely take the brunt of that. So to be able to get out of that workflow and, be able to use both hands and all my fingers instead of just one mouse finger for hours on end, I really, really like that. Let's see here. Again, if this isn't something that really you don't understand, who cares, We're taking a concept, we're taking a sketch or what could be a live jam, and we're putting it into a box so that we can produce, mix, master, and arrange it into a finished track. So we're taking a sketch or a live jam and putting it into a DAW that we can actually use to produce and mix and arrange a finished track. Another advantage to doing something like this is that this is an awesome way to collab with someone. If you have a friend who has an MPC Live as well, because you can export the entire project, load that to the internet, and send that to anyone all over the world. So as far as collabing, this is an amazing opportunity for collabs. Because when you're collabing in a DAW like Ableton or something, it's really common that you're not going to have the exact same plugins your other producer friends have. And if you want to send, an Ableton session to your friend in, Europe or something, they might not have the same exact plugins, and they might not be able to load the session. But if you're working in a hardware box like this, anybody who owns an MPC Live, I could export this and send them the session, and they could load up, add to it, tweak with the sounds, do other mixing, then save that and send it back to me. So it's a really large bonus for collab potential when you're doing stuff like this. Another thing, getting it inside of one box that you can take out of the studio has a lot of really serious implications. One of which is, I know a lot of people don't necessarily have a room like this. It took a lot of investment to get this acoustic treatment done in here so that I have an environment where I can really listen to music accurately. A lot of my friends don't have anything like that. And if you've got, your mix inside of one piece of gear, this doesn't even need to use a power pack. It's got a battery in it. You could literally just walk your AKAI into any studio, any friend's studio, and put it on their speakers in a professional environment, and suddenly you're mixing your track in a studio where, it's a lot different sonically than what you might have access to on your own. For those of you who might not even have monitor speakers and who only have headphones, that's a really big advantage. All right, let's get back to the actual production, and we'll get back to the notes maybe in a few. If anyone is still watching, I appreciate you being here, everyone. Hey, Colin. Hey, Grant. Hey, Gaz. Hey, Ronald. Hey, Joshua. All right. How is NX different from SonarWorks? I'm sorry, I don't know because I don't use either one of them. Okay, fantastic. So let's just see here. We got in the acid line here, and I believe I need to just go into the sample edit window so we can edit that out. Let's switch the camera back over here so we can see that, hopefully. All right. And let me go into the very beginning of that sample. Let's start the zoom in process so we can get right in on the very, very beginning of that sound. And I think right there looks good. Process and discard. Cool. All right, and I think this is just a 1-bar loop here that's just repeating. It absolutely is. So I don't know why I pressed that button. But what we'll need to do in this case, and there's that weird line again. That's always so strange when I'm doing these live streams and suddenly there's like anomalies that don't happen otherwise, right? Just want to trim that out and just do a 1-bar loop. I think we'll need to get rid of a couple more notes there. Just that one note at the end. And if we start zooming in there at the end, I can get right, whoops, go ahead and fix that. We want the end point rather. There we go. We want right in on the end point, and we're going to process and discard that. Cool. Now we'll zoom out a bunch. And I think that looks pretty good. So we'll just go ahead and assign that to a pad now. Now you might remember that we have our drums on the first set of 16 pads. And if I click over to the next bank, here's our bass sound. So I'm going to leave some spaces here in case you want to make variations of that bass recording. And I think I'm going to start on these upper sets of pads here to start loading in our melodic content. So if I go back to main and go to assign samples, we'll make sure that the pad is selected that I want to assign the sample to. And then I just find the sample, 303 acid, cool. Double click that. And now we can go ahead and press play, and I can just tap this in. Remember that on the bass line, for example, it doesn't actually play the whole sample every time I press the button and the pad, and we want the melodic loop here to be that same way. So we're going to go back into menu, go back into program edit, and adjust this. On the LFO modulation tab, I can turn that to a note on instead of a one shot, so that it just, only plays when I hold the pad down. I want to get a tiny little bit of release on that so it doesn't snap back to 0 super fast. Cool. All right. So now you can hear that we're not hearing this playing because it's not being held out. So what I need to do is just go into the sequencer tab. I'm going to go ahead and start zooming out a little bit so we can see all of the notes in one screen. I love this one bank workflow. And if I, touch a pad, it sort of highlights on the screen which pad I'm working with. Here it's B9, right? And what I want to do is I want to adjust the end point on all of those samples so that it just holds the full bar. Yeah, in it for the long haul, Luke. Hey, Ronald, thanks for tuning in. That sounds pretty good, right? Let's go ahead and just do a little bit more mixing on this, shall we? We'll go back to the menu, go to the program edit, and I'll just tap the pad that I want to work with, which is that acid, sound we just got. We're going to go ahead and assign a high-pass filter to this as well. That's a really common theme in my production. And this isn't to change the sound, it's just to remove any possible sub-frequencies that could be hiding out. We don't want it to change the sound. It's just a gentle high-pass filter set to like 10. Like, it's not even really affecting it. Just any subs that may be there will be gone. I'm talking about frequencies that we can't hear and that our speakers can't represent really, and that's important to get rid of stuff like that because it just takes up a little bit of extra headroom in the mix. Let's go ahead and set up in the MPC Live, let's go ahead and set up a reverb send at this time, shall we? We'll go to the menu and we're going to go to the track mixer section. Actually, up here in the little sort of upper left on the screen, if we scroll the tab when this is selected, we can scroll from our program to our returns. And here on return number 1, we have 4 different returns. These are effect sends basically. So I could put a reverb on 1, I could put delay on, return 2, etc., etc. And I can send any pad in the whole, bank here to any amount of those effects completely individually of each other. Another reason why I'm able to use this one bank workflow instead of having like all these individual tracks. I just find that I personally don't need to work that way inside of this box. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a reverb send on return number 1 by pressing over here on the inserts. The first thing we're going to do is actually put an EQ before the reverb, and this is really important. We're going to open this up, tapping on it here. Whoops, sorry, by hitting the pencil rather and getting the parametric EQ window open. And I'm going to go over to the high and low cut tabs and turn these on. We're going to remove all of the frequencies below about 500 hertz so that any low frequency content is going to be shaved off and removed before it enters this reverb. And what is that going to do for us exactly? That's going to help prevent some mud from happening in the reverb itself, because we don't necessarily want to send like bass frequencies to the reverb. We're going to go ahead and actually put the reverb in now after that EQ. And we have some choices here for which reverb we'd like to work with. I'm just going to pick, I think, the air reverb. And we'll go ahead and open that up. And we've got some presets built in here. You know, basic small room, basic medium room, large room, concert hall, stuff like that. I think maybe I'll just pick, I don't know, like opera or something. I mean, let's find out. I think we'll leave that there for now. And what we can do is start assigning some sounds. Whoops. Like the clap, for instance. If we go to the pad mixer tab and I tap on the pad that I want to send to that reverb, now at the bottom we have these, you know, adjustings. I can adjust the level of this pad individually, the panning of it, or where it's being sent. So we can send it to effects send 1, effects send 2, effects send 3, or effects send 4. And I just want to send it to effects send 1. So we can just start turning this up until we hear the you can see I'm doing a lot of scrolling here, but if you don't want to do it this way, you can just double tap on the pad itself, and then now we have a different kind of control over what we're sending here. Okay, so I just want to send a little bit of reverb to give a little bit of acoustic space to some of these sounds. Let's go ahead and do the same thing with our 808 snare. And I'll just kind of scroll this up until I start hearing it, you know. And a lot of times with reverb, I'll scroll it up until I'm hearing, you know, way too much of it, and then sort of dial it back down. Yeah, I want to add just a tiny little bit of air on that sound. Let's do the same thing with this low tom. Again, I'm talking tiny little bit here. Let's do the same thing with this half hat. Just a tiny little amount. And the same thing with our closed hat, just a tiny little amount to sort of get these things inside of the same acoustic space as each other. How does that sound? Our new acid sound might be a little loud, so I'm going to bring that down in the mix a little. Because I want the acid sound to sort of sit behind the bass line. I don't want that acid sound to necessarily be our big giant lead, because we still have one more lead sound to get into this mix over the top of all of that stuff. I think it's still a little bit too loud, so I'm going to bring the volume back on that acid line a little bit more. Yeah, that's getting there. How's that sounding? So much tidier. Yeah, I'm really anal about keeping it organized and keeping it clean in here. That's one of the reasons actually why I changed it up so much between the projects, is I can clean everything while I do it. Yeah, for sure. Let's talk just a little bit more about some of the reasons why you might actually want to do stuff like this. I mean, because let's be real. All you have to do, I mean, once you've got it set up, I could very easily just put a camera on, you know, hit record and do some tweaking and then record that as a video. There's the live jam. We're done. But that's really, I think, night and day a different process than actually producing, mixing, and arranging a track, which is, you know, a lot which is a whole other set of skills, really. And that's kind of what we're taking the time to be able to do, to really produce and arrange and master a track. Um, let's see here. We talked about that if you have lousy monitors or no monitors, that you can, literally just take this wherever you want and for mixing and mastering, and that's kind of a really big bonus in itself. Another thing is that, maybe you don't want to work in the studio all the time. Maybe you want to sit on the couch next to your wife while she's watching, Jeopardy or something like that, but you want to be making beats. Well, the MPC Live is battery powered. It doesn't really need anything but a headphones, and you're off and running. I mean, you can use this in the car while maybe your wife's in the store shopping, or you can use this on the couch while maybe, your wife is watching Jeopardy, if you get my drift. Any number of sort of, bonuses that you can get once you remove yourself from that same environment that you're used to working in all the time. Another thing is that, like I said, I mix everything up, and that every project that I'm doing, I'm using, a different set of gear. So if I am working on this as a track, per se, I wouldn't really be able to work on really anything else at all until I absolutely finish this project, and then can clear this stuff off the table. But when I get all the pieces recorded into the box like this, then I can clear the table as needed. I can do other projects as needed, and I can just load up this project inside of one box to work on, whenever I feel like it. That alone is definitely a huge, huge benefit to doing something like this. And lastly, we did discuss this already too, but you don't necessarily have to set it up to where you're producing and arranging a finished track. You can set it up to where your intention is to use, this as a live thing. And for instance, maybe you want some more stuff that you can have hands-on control over, but maybe you don't want to take an entire desk worth of gear out to a club. The virus is going to be over at some point. We are going to be playing out again, those of you who are playing out again, and it's going to be nice to be prepared for that kind of stuff. You could very easily not sample the drums, but just sample the melodics, and then bring this box too. Now you've got two boxes on the desk, but it's still a lot less gear and a lot more doable, like if you're, traveling to clubs and whatnot. For instance, if I was alone and in traveling, I have no way I'd be able to carry all of this gear, but I would absolutely be able to carry an MPC Live and one drum machine or something. So that kind of definitely brings a whole other advantage to the situation, I think. Let's go ahead and sample in the last synthesizer line, shall we? Let's see here. Let me just check in with the chat and make sure that I don't have any questions I need to answer. Price of that AKAI. I actually was lucky enough to find this one from someone on Facebook who just didn't need it anymore. I think they wanted to play Xbox more than they wanted to play with the MPC Live. I got this one for 500 even, and that was an absolute steal. They go for quite a bit more than that new, but because of the MPC Live 2 and because of the MPC 1 and because of the Force, you can definitely find an MPC Live for a much more reduced price in the used market. So yeah, that sort of depends. I got really lucky with that price on this one here. What stand am I using for the SL MK3? What this is I'm actually just using two little sort of desktop individual stands here, something you might put a laptop on or something. And then I've just got this sitting on two of those. It seems to work pretty well. I think these are On Stage stands is the brand, I think, on these, the little laptop guys there. Let's go ahead and sample that last lead line in here, shall we? We're going to go back to the sampler tab, and if I press play, I believe it's coming from this channel. Yeah. That's got quite a bit of effect on it. We're going to leave that as is. And just make sure there's no effect trail going over here. I'm going to hit arm and record. I didn't quite get that where I wanted it. I think I'll just get longer than what I want, and then I'll loop it around on itself. Just a pair of lap stops. I think they're on stage stands. I'm not real sure on that 100%. Okay, we definitely got 4 bars of it there, and I don't need that tail. We're going to go ahead and edit this here. And I'm going to call this lead 1 for now. And we'll just go ahead and keep, and then we go into the menu and the, menu and sample edit. And then here we can see that part here. Strangely, it's going to switch the camera back here. Unfortunately, it's doing that weird line thing again. Go ahead back to the start point and start zooming in there on this sample. We're going to get right in on the beginning and go, yep, there we go. Process, discard, whoops, process, do it, discard, cool. Start zooming out here. And I want to make it so this sample does the same thing as our other melodic content. I want to make it so that when we hit the pad, it doesn't just play the whole sample every time. So, I guess first thing we'll need to do is assign that to a pad then. So if I go to assign samples, on the first section of 16, we've got our drums. On the second section of 16, I've left some room for our basses and some more room for our melodics. So we've got our acid line number 1. I'm going to press this pad here, and I'm going to put lead number 1 on that. There we go. Cool. And so if we go back to the menu now, go back to Program Edit, tap the pad we want to affect, and change that to note on. Now it'll only play when we hold down the pad. We can go ahead and turn that volume down on that, maybe just by a little bit by default. And we'll do the same thing we've been doing with the built-in filter to that pad as well. We're just going to put it on a super gentle high-pass filter, maybe about 10 here. So you wouldn't even hear the difference, really. Let me bring that release up a touch. Cool. And now we can just go ahead and put this in. If we start moving around on the window here, whatever pad we touch is highlighted on the screen, so we can see that it's B11 here that I need to work with. Go ahead and zoom in a little bit, pop a dot there, and go ahead and highlight that dot. And we just want to edit the end of the sample now. This is a 4-bar loop, if I'm not mistaken. Up in volume a little bit. Yeah. I think we're going to send a little bit of the reverb send that we set up inside of the MPC Live to this new lead sound as well. So all we have to do is make sure that we're on the send, and I can just start turning that up. Or we could double click this, We can really hear how much we're adding. I just want to add a little bit. So that when I let go, you can hear that there's still some of that air floating around. I'm getting a little bit more level on the main program than I would like to, because we've added so many sounds now. So we're going to go ahead and bring the volume on that down 1 click, and then we're going to go back to our master bus here, and we're going to take a look at what is happening with our maximizer plugin. We're going to take a look at all the level that we're sending into it and how much it's actually squeezing our mix, because we don't want it to squeeze a whole lot. Okay, so I'm going to press play again, but what I want you to do is to look in on this middle meter here. The left is our input level. The right is our output level, and the middle is how much we're actually limiting that sound, how much we're, compressing it basically. And we want to make sure that it's compressing it a little bit, that there's definitely some, level being jammed into this limiter, but we don't want it to be super hot. So I would say -10 at the most, and you definitely don't want that to be a consistent, just pushing down image. You want it to be moving around as your mix, has life in it. You don't want to be squashing that out. We're just trying to use the maximizer to do exactly what it says, to get the maximum amount of volume and glue. Whoops, I've got the camera a little screwy there. To get the maximum amount of volume we can out of the mix and to sort of glue everything together. So see how it's just moving a little bit there? If that was a constant line just pushing way down, we would start lowering the levels that we're sending into that. But for now, I think we're doing just fine, and we'll go ahead and save at this time. So we've been streaming for just about 2 hours. If anyone has any questions at all, whether they be about, the MPC Live or whether about music production in general, now would be a fantastic time to ask those, as we're going to kind of start winding it down here. Let's see here. I think we're going to do a little bit of separation on these two sounds between the acid sound. Oops, I'm in mute here. Between the acid sound and the lead sound. And I think what we'll do is just go ahead and go into the program edit menu and just kind of pan these a tiny little bit so they're not in the exact same stereo space as each other. We're going to go ahead and pan that acid line maybe like 4 to, this is really, really subtle, right? And maybe like 4 to the right. To give you an example, it goes all the way to 50. So this is definitely not a hard panning. I'm just edging it the slightest bit off of the direct center line to get a tiny little bit more stereo space in the mix. I'm going to go back to main and save. Yeah, just take the phrases, exactly. Yeah, there's no chance, there's no probability in any of the MPC stuff. Whoops, I accidentally clicked the wrong button. Oops, now I'm shutting it down. We'll reboot that in just a sec then. But yeah, the electron boxes and the probability is absolutely something that is pretty much magical. Another option, like another way to approach something like this, if your goal is to just, get a finished track, is to use something like the 1010 blue box that we used just a few weeks ago, which will literally allow us to, route all of the sounds through that mixer, which is also a multi-track recorder. So we could do it that way as well. But it doesn't give you the option to produce and mix and arrange like we can do with the individual pieces here. For instance, now that I've got all the individual pieces here, I can create, tons of patterns. I can create variations. I can create rolls and turnarounds inside of the box as well. I should add some of that. Forget about it. We would all love that. Probability in AKAI boxes would be absolutely magic. Yes, please. I would sign up for that immediately. Don't use Overbridge. Nope, I do not use Overbridge at all. I did use Overbridge one time with the Digit Tact for one track that I had built. I tested it out, but it wasn't for me. I don't like the way that it spits out the tracks. I don't like the way that it's like all of the tracks unaffected and then one effects track. It completely screwed up my entire workflow conceptually. And for me personally, what I ended up doing actually with that is just soloing every single part and playing the entire track back from start to finish, so that I would get each part in its own track with the effects baked in. So I didn't even really use Overbridge at the end of the day. I just don't use it. I don't like that workflow. It doesn't do it for me. I need to have those effects and EQ baked into my sound. Having them on a separate track is very weird to me personally. I know a lot of people use that workflow and like it, and that's awesome. Yeah, as many split out tracks as possible for sure, but you still need the effects baked into the sounds. I mean, I wouldn't send my stuff to a mix engineer ever, let alone give someone else the control over, the effects signals in my tracks. No, I'm going to mix my own stuff. Sometimes you have to, send it to an outside house for mastering, especially if you're on a label, because they're going to want to, have control over that final product, but not the individual tracks. I'm not going to give up that kind of control over my music. Just to another mixer per se. I don't really find the need to either. If I was on like a label, I don't know, something like that, then maybe. But I mean, that's not really where it's at right now. So let's see here. I think we got all of the pieces today now inside the MPC Live. Let's go ahead and get a variation of that lead line because there's a real nice filter effect that I've got on it in the MC707, and it'd be real nice to have that as a variation as well. So if we just go ahead and go to the pad mutes, and then we can mute, our lead line. Yeah, we can maybe mute that as well. Cool. Let's go back into menu and sampler. Cool. And let's just see about this. Yeah. So here we can get a different filter variation on that sound here. All right, we'll go ahead and press record and arm. And again, I'll just record more than what we need because when it, turns around, the track itself will chop itself off. We're going to call this lead synth 2 for now. And keep. We just need to edit the beginning of that real fast. So if we go into sample edit, find lead synth 2, start zooming in there. We can let me change the camera so we can see what I'm doing. All right, and we'll discard that. We'll start zooming in on the downbeat of that so we can get right in there. Be a little closer. Cool. Process and discard. And we're going to go back into the menu. Actually, we're going to assign that sample to a pad so we can start telling the pad how to behave. So we'll put it on the pad next to our first lead. And cool. And go back to the menu and then tell this pad that it doesn't need to play all the time. Every single time I hold it. Cool. So now we have these two different variations of that lead synth. And what we'll do to switch back and forth between those is I'm just going to copy this whole sequence to the next sequence. So copy sequence 1 into sequence 2. Let's go ahead and just call this sequence 2 for now. I mean, normally I would give these a name, but we've been streaming for quite some time, and we're not going to go the extra mile, I don't think, there. So we got sequence 1 and sequence 2. Fantastic. And that should be the same right on. So all we need to do then is actually I have this pad muted, so we'll go and unmute that. All right, I think I have that muted as well. I'm going to keep that muted. If we go back into the grid view here, this is, make sure we're on sequence 2. Fantastic. And in the grid view, I could just change what loop is playing here. So I can select this loop and tell it to play the next one. All right, so here now we're going to play through sequence 1, and at the end of sequence 1, I'll switch to sequence 2, and we'll hear the difference happening between these synthesizer loop variations. Do you hear those loops change over? I think our new loop is a little bit too loud, so we'll go ahead and bring that down a little bit. Yeah, I see our other one is already brought down to -2, so we'll do the same thing for the new one. And then also I will match, let's go to the menu and the pad mixer, and I'll match the amount of reverb send on the new sound so that it matches our original synth loop in the same acoustic space. And let's see, there we go. Let's also just make sure that those sounds never accidentally play over each other by accident, shall we? We're going to go back into the menu here, and then I'm going to tell pad, let's see, what is this? That this is going to be B12. So we want to make sure that when this pad hits, it turns off the one next to it if it's playing. And the same thing here. If this pad is playing, it should turn off the one next to it, which is B11. And now Those pads won't ever play over each other per se. I'm not sure I understand that question, Philip. Clip programs? Are you talking about specifically in the MPC Live, or are you talking about something like Ableton, for instance? I don't know how they or even if per se, if we have that sort of a thing on the live, I'm not sure that it's the same kind of workflow as the force. The force is definitely for sending like different clips and stuff like that. I think maybe there's a way to do that with the MPC Live. Again, I'm just not really sure because I don't use the MPC Live that way specifically. I still think that second one might need to come down in volume just a little bit. This is just sort of little details at this point, though. And that's and that's sort of the point here, and that's what I would do sort of from this point on. If it's just a lot of little details. Now that I have all of these pieces in the MPC Live, it's time to actually start arranging a track, trying to make an intro section, maybe bringing in other sounds, finding some other effect sounds to bring in through this, and even maybe assigning your own custom settings to these cue links here. It looks like we have 4 knobs that we can adjust and assign and mess with here on the right side, but we actually have 16 knobs, because if we click the cue link button above the knobs, we have 4 little different lights that will light up. So depending on which of the 4 lights is lit up, that's what section of these knobs you have. So you actually have 4 different instances of what these knobs can be set up to do. So you can go in and you can route, to where, knob, on the second row, on the bottom knob, for instance, this does a filter movement. And you could set it up to where, knob 1 on the third bank does volume for a specific sound, or, any number of things like that you can go in and set up for live use, depending on what your intention is with the box. I find that's really important as well, and something that's not often addressed in tutorials in general. And that is, I think a lot of things really, really depend on what your personal end goal is with the music. For instance, if I'm setting up something to use, to make a live jam, it's not going to be the same tools or the same, things that I'm doing if I'm setting up to create a finished track where my goal is, to compete with the highest quality finished music in the world. That's going to be a whole different process. And I think it really depends as to what your end goal is with the music, as to how you want to get there. At the end of the day, I know I say this quite a bit, but at the end of the day, for me personally, if I'm looking to create, the highest quality production music that I can, it's going to be Ableton Live 10 out of 10 times, and we don't need any of this hardware. This is all just a choice. This is just different ways of working. I've been at this for over 20 years, and I really like to mix it up into how I put things together and what tools I use every single day. Basically, I'm going to go ahead and check in back with the chat and see if I'm missing any last-minute questions. Yeah, MPC, I don't really know how that works in this box. I only know that from the Force, because the Force is really laid out that way. If you're interested, actually, let me say that. If you're interested in a box specifically so that you can launch different clips in real time and mix and match different clips from different tracks, it's the AKAI Force. That's what you want, hands down. The MPC Live is just not going to get you there. A lot of people didn't gel with the Force when it came out because it didn't do all the things they promised that it was going to be able to do. So you can find these used, pretty darn cheap, maybe even as cheap as the Live these days, especially since the new MPC Live 2s are out and the MPC 1 is out. These have gone dramatically down in price. I paid full price for this. It was a lot. It was $1,500 when it came out. You can get these new now, I think, for less than $1,000. But this is what you're looking for if you want to do clips. You know, you've got to have a track on each of these lines, columns of clips, right? So this is going to be like your drums or maybe your kick drum. This is going to be maybe your hi-hats and maybe your claps and stuff, and maybe your melodic stuff and your basses and your chords or whatever. And then you can, you know, each one of these buttons represents a clip, a different MIDI pattern. And so in real time, you can really shuffle these around and really do a lot of, this is, you know, meant to do something like that. Clip work on an MPC Live like this, in my opinion, is like an afterthought. It's just not meant to do that sort of thing. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but it's certainly not going to be like as easy to do as it would be on like the Force, where that's really meant to work that way. All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone tuning in. We've been here for about 2 hours and 15 minutes today. I'm just going to hang out for just one more second, let you guys say goodbye to each other in the chat. And I want to say thanks again for everyone who's tuning in and sticking with me. We'll be doing another live stream next Sunday at 10 a.m. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be. I'm kind of taking advantage of having a lot of space on my desk still. For those of you who've been watching my Eurorack live streams, you know that I've got a very large custom Eurorack case coming very soon, hopefully. And that's going to be taking up, you know, the majority of my desk space for future projects. So I'm kind of trying to utilize this extra space that I've got between now and that time. But yeah, so that's what I would do from here, from what we've put together, is I would just start creating lots of different patterns, lots of different sequences. If I need, you know, more variations of the parts that we've recorded in, I can still record more variations in before like closing down and putting all the gear away. Yeah. This would basically be like the full, robust, kind of really high energy section of the track. You know, I really like the way this sounds. Yeah. All right. In fact, let's go ahead and make sure that we save on this. Again, I can't stress this enough. If you've got a friend who's got an MPC Live, at this point, you could fully just export the entire project out of this box and send it to your friend, and they could load it right up in their box, add to it, you know. You can kind of do that with the other AKAI boxes, but it pretty much needs to be the exact same one. You don't want to like send an MPC Live project to your friend who has a Force and then try to get that back. It's just going to get a little bit weird. But yeah, I think the collab aspect of this kind of thing alone is really fun as well. Because again, like I said earlier, if you're collabing with someone in Ableton, it's happened to me so many times where you have different plugins. So if you're using, you know, Serum and maybe some Waves plugins, well, what if they don't have Serum and those Waves plugins? Then they can't load your project. You'll need to render everything to audio, and it just gets a little bit of a hassle. Whereas using something like this, you know, when you're not customizable, it's just the same. Really awesome for collabing. Hey, all right. Thanks for tuning in, Gaz. I appreciate that. Fantastic. All right, you guys. So until next week, thanks for watching. Let's see here. I don't actually stop it from there anymore. We stop it from here. Okay. Let's see if I can figure this out. It's this one. Thanks for joining. See you next time. Thanks, David.